On his flight to Alaska on Friday, President Trump declared that if he did not secure a ceasefire in his talks with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, he was, quote, not going to be happy. Trump said that there would be, quote, severe consequences if a ceasefire was not agreed to. Hours later, Trump got back on Air Force One after the meeting with no ceasefire, but also no consequences. Not only no severe consequences, but no consequences for Putin of any kind. Trump stumbled into that Alaska meeting on a wave of chaos and incompetence. A week and a half before the Anchorage meeting, Trump's real estate friend, termed special envoy Steve Witkoff, met with Putin yet again for, what is this, like the fifth time? After Witkoff's big happy meeting with Putin, Trump posted that it had been, quote, highly productive and great progress had been made. Trump then called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders with the good news out of Steve Witkoff's meeting. Apparently, Witkoff reported back that Putin was willing to withdraw his troops from some of Ukraine. Wow. Are you sure, Steve? Did you definitely get that exactly right? Did you get it in writing? Did you get it in English? According to the German tabloid Bild, Steve Witkoff, however he got that information, he got it backwards. He, quote, misinterpreted. Putin was not offering to withdraw Russia's troops from Ukraine. He was demanding that Ukraine withdraw their troops from their own country and give it to him. Witkoff reversed himself in his explanation in a call with European officials the next day. He finally cleared it up, I think, on yet another call the day after that. Oops. Why does Steve Witkoff meet with Putin all the time again? What are those conversations for? The chaos continued at the Alaska summit. On Saturday, NPR reported that some random person found these documents sitting on a public printer at a hotel in Anchorage. These are apparently made by U.S. diplomatic staff. They include the exact movements of multiple officials, including the president, non-public information, the phone numbers of government employees, lots of plans for the luncheon to be held in honor of His Excellency, Vladimir Putin. To give you a sense of how Russia felt about how well the Alaska summit went for them, the Russian state media outlet RT released this video today, purportedly showing an armored vehicle driven by Russian troops flying two flags, one Russian, one American, as in Russia is now making war against Ukraine using the power of the United States of America. Russian state media has been gloating about the Alaska meeting ever since it was announced, particularly about Trump greeting Putin at the airport in Alaska with a literal red carpet. Today in Washington, D.C., Trump met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and a host of European leaders at the White House. And while Trump in Alaska gave Putin like weird little claps of excitement as Putin walked toward him, and he gave him a big handshake and a big personal greeting in Alaska, today at the White House, Trump sent a White House staff member. He sent a White House protocol chief outside to greet the European leaders who traveled in support of Zelensky. Because one of them is Vladimir Putin and the other ones are supposedly our allies. That's how the Trump administration has been handling this ongoing, disastrous international crisis. Tonight, Trump has obviously proclaimed this new series of White House meetings to have been a success. Given what we have seen so far, who knows what to expect over the next couple of days. Joining us now is Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia. Mr. Ambassador, it's always great to have you with us. Thank you for being here tonight. I've been really interested to hear your thoughts coming out of today's meeting and how you think it went today.
Well, first, we need to start with Alaska. That was one of the most disastrous moments for American diplomacy that I know of in my lifetime and maybe in the history of our country.
Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor, former U.S. ambassador to Russia Michael McFaul, he's also an MSNBC international affairs analyst, and Hagar Shamali, former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the UN. Yamiche, I want to start with you at the White House. What else is the president saying this morning about how these meetings went? And to the extent that there are any preparations at this point, what do they look like for a meeting between Zelensky and Putin?
Well, President Trump is both saying that these meetings went well and that there is sort of progress to peace, but he's also acknowledging that President Putin might not want a deal at all, even though at another point he was saying that President Putin might make a deal just for him. He also said that President Putin, in some ways, is someone that's going to have to be critical to these discussions, and that there's going to have to be a meeting between Ukraine and Russia before there can be this trilateral meeting. The president also, some critics would say, and some experts would say, was mirroring Russian talking points, in that he said it was insulting for Ukraine to try to join NATO, and that essentially the Ukraine was almost part of the reason why this war broke out in the first place. Other people, most European leaders, most viewers of this war would say, of course, that Ukraine was invaded by Russia and it's a sovereign country. But take a listen to what President Trump said in his conversation, specifically about his relationship with President Putin.
Well, I think they expected it. I didn't do it in front of them. I thought that would be disrespectful to President Putin. I wouldn't do that because they have not had the warmest relations. I maintained a very good relationship. I mean, you saw that when he got off his plane, I got off my plane. There's a warmth there that you can't, there's a decent feeling. And it's a good thing, not a bad thing.
So again, the president saying that there's a warmth between him and President Putin, while also again saying that Ukraine was essentially insulting the world, and Russia in particular, when it tried to join NATO. So striking words there, Ali.
Yeah, not surprising that the president is relying once again, as he often has, on the personal diplomacy piece of this. But Mr. Ambassador, knowing Russia as you do, how do you think Vladimir Putin received those images yesterday out of the White House with the president alongside Zelensky as well as other top European leaders?
I think he's probably pretty relaxed about it, because President Trump confuses a warm meeting, a nice handshake, with an outcome of consequence that advance America's national interests or the interests of our allies. He's just completely confused by that point. Did we get any concession out of Putin out of all of the red carpet treatment in Alaska? I can't think of a single thing that changed. Putin's had his position since 2022. He hasn't changed it. And so far, what we've had is negotiations about the ability to negotiate. There haven't actually been substantive negotiations yet. I applaud President Trump for trying to end this barbaric, horrific war. But I just don't see how this particular strategy, treating Putin, his excellency, his best friend, we have a warm relationship, has achieved anything substantive, anything tangible towards baby steps towards ending this war.
You are far from the only person expressing skepticism here. Hagar, French President Emmanuel Macron said he's not convinced that Russia is interested in peace right now. I want to play for you some of what he told my colleague Kristen Welker. Watch.
Great deal is a deal with security guarantees and a robust peace. As far as I'm concerned, when I look at the situation and the facts, I don't see President Putin really willing to get peace now. But perhaps I'm too pessimistic. But so I think it's very important to launch this process.
Hagar, what do you make of that assessment, and what's informing Macron's mindset here?
You know, what's interesting is that Macron might have made the evolution that Trump will inevitably go through. Because if we all remember, Macron himself made overtures to Putin, much to our dismay, and tried himself to try and insert himself and try and get Putin toward peace, and saw the reaction. And Zelensky has said that himself as well, right? The interesting thing here is that if you look at our history, both Republicans and Democrats have always wanted to collaborate with post-Cold War Russia. And the fact is that it's always been difficult and always been disappointing, even under Boris Yeltsin. And this is what perhaps President Trump needs to come to that conclusion as well. So he's going through those motions. And I think we have to understand that the Trump administration, or President Trump himself, he views this, while he may have a similar goal that the previous Biden administration did, which was, we can't appease a dictator. We certainly don't want Putin to continue trying to take more land or aggressing his other neighbors. At the same time, he views it from a different standpoint, which is practical, right? That he's looking at it from a pragmatic standpoint. He doesn't think Ukraine can win. He doesn't want to give all the aid Europe also doesn't want to give all the aid Ukraine needs to win this war effectively and push Russia back. So he's making this, going through the motions of trying to see if he can get a deal through his way. I would agree that I'm pessimistic that Putin will ever really negotiate in good faith.
Yeah, and I think the way that you're talking about the pragmatism is the way that others have said for Trump. It's just about a deal. Make a deal, any deal. And in order to do that, security guarantees is a very key piece. Yamiche, this was a bit of a live ball yesterday. What could that look like? Have you fleshed out any further details from your sources within the...
Well, of course, it's better than the fiasco from the last meeting where our president and vice president embarrassed the democratically elected leader of Ukraine. Some people compare him to Churchill for fighting against these barbaric imperial invasion. We should treat him with respect. And the president did that. I applaud that. Second, I thought it was very important to have all the European leaders there, including 2 European leaders, the prime minister from Italy, the president from Finland, that have a close personal relationship with Trump. That helped to set a better tone. And the issues like security guarantees and trying to get back the abducted children from Ukraine that Putin has kidnapped, those were on the agenda because all those people were there. That's good news as well. But I want to be clear here. A good meeting is not an outcome. This is a great meeting and a great photo op. But look at what Putin said today. The president keeps giving away his best cards before negotiations. Why is he taking NATO off the table? In diplomacy, you got to play your cards to get something back. And what I'm just struck by is the president just keeps giving away cards before they negotiate. He said, no Americans on the ground. Why not trade that in a negotiation for something tangible?
I think another card that he has started to give away is the issue of land swaps. Hagar, how far apart is the U.S. from its allies on what would be some key components of a peace deal, specifically the idea of Ukraine, which has said repeatedly...
So Donald Trump promised the world he was the ultimate deal maker, the man who could walk into any room and walk out with a victory. But when he sat across Vladimir Putin in high-stakes ceasefire talks, Trump's so-called skills completely collapsed. What we saw wasn't strength, it was absolute weakness. Now, it was complete incompetence as well at the same time. And it was a failure on the world stage. Unfortunately, Trump's brand has always been looking tough and acting tough, a billionaire negotiator, a man in charge. But international diplomacy isn't a reality TV show, is it, guys? Now, it takes strategy, knowledge, discipline. Now, Trump had none of that. Instead, he bought slogans, empty lines, empty theatrics. Now, while Putin had arrived with a clear plan, Trump showed up with the bluster and ego. And that's why Putin walked away with the upper hand, while Trump walked away humiliated. Now, let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, Vladimir Putin is a ruthless operator. He spent decades bending global crisis to his advantage. And Trump, now he spent decades selling his name on stakes, casinos and a TV show. This was never a fair fight, was it, when they were sitting down and negotiating? Putin played like a fiddle, using flattery, distractions and vague promises. And Trump fell for every trick. Instead of pressing for real results, he actually bent over backwards to please a dictator. Now, I don't call that leadership, guys, do you? I call it submission, to be honest. Now, moving on. So what happened at the ceasefire table? Nothing. To be honest, absolutely nothing. The talks collapsed, violence continued, it is continuing, peace never came. And why? Because Trump refused to hold Putin accountable. He refused to demand guarantees, he refused to stand up for American interests. Instead, he smiled for the cameras, declared victory and walked away. Days later, the fighting resumed. Trump's deal, supposedly, was exposed as nothing but a complete photo op. Now, diplomacy runs on trust, strength and consistency. Under Trump, America has none of it. Our allies looked on in disbelief as Trump sided more with Putin than with his actual own intelligence community. Now, that's just not just embarrassing, it's actually dangerous. The message was clear. Under Trump, the US was no longer the leader of the free world. Instead of defending democracy, Trump enabled authoritarian power, and instead of promoting peace, he left chaos in his wake. Now, Trump's always bragging about the art of the deal, we're going to make a deal, but what we got was the art of the no deal. No ceasefire, no accountability, absolutely no progress, just photo ops and a headline. Now, for Trump, it was never about peace, it's always about ego. The cameras, the applause, the illusion of success. But when the cameras shut off, the world paid the price for his incompetence. That's actually what's happening here. Here's the truth. Putin didn't just survive those talks, he actually won. He showcased America's weakness. He exposed Trump's lack of strategy. He bought more time to expand his influence. Meanwhile, Trump, the self-proclaimed dealmaker, was reduced to Putin's easiest opponent. A president who gave away leverage without even realizing it. Now, Donald Trump's failure with Vladimir Putin is more than just a bad meeting. It's an actual warning, a warning of what happens when arrogance replaces strategy, when ego replaces competence, and when America is led by a man more interested in looking strong than actually being strong. Trump promised peace, he delivered chaos. He promised victory and he delivered defeat, unfortunately. History will not remember him as a master negotiator. He's actually remembered him for a failed leader who surrendered America's strength to a dictator. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're enjoying our content, please do like, share and subscribe. It really does go a long way and we appreciate your comments and any feedback. Thank you. We'll see you on the next one.